Good morning. Thank you everybody again for your flexibility. This video is going to cover all three learning targets, 301, 302, 303. So I know there's going to be a lot of information coming at you. I will also make sure this video is posted to Empower, and certainly the sub can push pause if needed for the pacing of this particular lesson. The first thing I wanted to remind you of is the wording of the learning target 301 about the parts of the Constitution. You can see it talks about how you will be able to explain the parts of the Constitution and how they combine to form our current government. One of the parts of the Constitution that's important, and there's a video here embedded in the presentation, which you can watch on your own during a personal flex time. It's just fun. It's a Schoolhouse Rock. So for now, I think I'll bypass that, but that's something that is there if you would like to listen to it. One of the parts of the Constitution that's really important is the preamble. And so at this point, some of you will need to set up a new page of notes called Parts of the Constitution 301. Others of you will be able to pull up a document that you already have called 301. Of course, writing these things down on a notebook page is always an option as well. You'll know that you have notes about 301 if you did the jigsawing activity, if that's bringing back any memories from last week, where I randomly numbered you off into groups and each person in your group took a category of notes to be in charge of. Those people who are remembering that probably already have a page of notes called Parts of Constitution 3.01. If not, take a few minutes right now to set that particular page of notes up. And again, if the sub needs to push pause at this point to get everybody caught up, that would be great. All right, now that you have your notes set up, one of the things that you need to add to your notes is the definition of the preamble written at the top of this page, that it's the introduction that explains why the Constitution is written. You certainly don't need to type up the entire preamble as it's printed there. However, I do think what I've put into red really helps explain that why, the real purpose of the Constitution. The first line there, "We the people of the United States," is a short phrase, a 7-word phrase, but that's probably the most important part of the preamble, if not of the entire Constitution, because it's setting the tone that this is about the people determining the government. This is about democracy. This isn't about I, the king, declare, or we, Congress, declare. This is we, the people. So this is starting at the bottom as a grassroots movement. So again, starting with the people. Another keyword that I've put into red font there is justice. That there would be fairness in our country. And that's one of the reasons why the Constitution was written. Another word there, tranquility, meaning peace. That we were going to have peace within our country. And then finally, our posterity. This is also what I think is really, really cool, is that these framers of the Constitution, these forefounders of our country, knew enough to realize that this document needed to have staying power. So when it says our posterity, it means for our kids, our grandkids, for the future, moving forward. They wanted it to last for years and years and years. So I think those 4 lines, or those 4 areas that I've highlighted, are really good examples of why the Constitution was written. So again, for this particular information, make sure you have the definition, and then make sure you have a couple of those examples of why it was written. To form a democracy, to ensure fairness and peace, and then to make sure that fairness and peace lasted for future generations. Some of you have this information, which are on the next, I believe, 3 slides. The whole point of this information is to give you some of the main ideas and principles of the Constitution. If you already have this information from the jigsawing activity, you're just going to double check your work. It's like in math where they give you the answer key and you just double check. If you're someone who hasn't seen this information yet, you didn't participate in the jigsaw activity, then you will need to get this information down. This presentation is already in Empower, so if you don't get a chance to get everything down or everything processed, of course you can check out Empower later. The first important principle is called limited government, and limited government simply means that everybody in our country has to follow the Constitution, even our government, which is unique. There's a lot of places that might have a constitution or other guiding documents, and their president, king, prime minister is above the law and doesn't need to follow the law. So our limited government means just that our government is limited by the laws just like anyone else. A common, everyday, normal citizen is limited by the laws. Another part that's really important about our Constitution are majority rule with minority rights. We're used to a system, and we always talk about majority rules, and we vote on things all the time. Even at school, we'll vote, do you want a pizza party or an ice cream party? And we're always used to majority rules. The key part of the Constitution is that it also makes sure that minority rights are protected. This is a hot topic right now in current events. Well, really ever since Trump and Pence were running for president and vice president, now that they're elected, this is the concern that some people are raising, is they acknowledge, majority rules, so okay, Electoral College went to Trump and Pence, but now they're really concerned about minority rights. So will the rights of women, disabled people, Mexicans, immigrants, Muslims, will those people still be taken care of with the new administration? And you can tell that since this is part of our Constitution, we do build in protections for minority groups. So even though the news doesn't really articulate it this way, or when people are sharing their frustrations, they don't really share it this way, but certainly you're hearing pockets of our population concerned with this very issue or this very principle of the Constitution, majority rule with minority rights. Some other important pieces, let me bring it all up here. There we go. Federalism is important. Federalism simply means we're going to have a national government and a state government. This is in direct response to the Articles of Confederation. Remember, the Articles of Confederation were extremely weak. And they were weak on purpose because our government, our founding fathers were trying to avoid a situation like King George III. So they wanted a really weak government. Well, then they realized, whoops, we made it too weak with the Articles of Confederation. So here you're seeing them trying to strengthen our government, where we'll have both a national government and a state government. The Articles of Confederation were only worried about state government, and we know how that turned out. The federal government, the national level, is going to worry about national concerns like military, international trade, our national budget, obviously those big ticket items that affect all 50 states. State level, because every state has their own tradition, their own cultures, their own way of life. Each state gets to make some of their own decisions. And probably one of the biggest areas, because it affects you and I on a daily basis, is education. Each state gets to decide what their Department of Education looks like. The infographic there, or not infographic rather, but just the clip art picture that I stuck in there shows you a balance, which is what federalism is all about, is trying to balance national government and state government. Separation of powers is the part of the Constitution that sets up the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, giving them each unique roles to play. Again, trying to keep things in balance, trying to keep things equal. So setting up those three branches. This slide gives information about those three branches. Legislative branch is set up in Article 1. I'm only mentioning the articles on these because the article shows the importance that the framers of the Constitution gave them. So the framers of the Constitution definitely thought the legislative branch was the most important. And you can tell why they think it was the most important with the second bullet there. They gave the legislative branch the power to make laws, which is a huge responsibility and carries a lot of power with it. And they also gave the legislative branch control of the money. So minting the money or making the money and passing legislation to get that done, setting the budget, And again, power and money go hand in hand. And then the other piece I'd add to the legislative branch is that there are two different parts to our Congress. We have the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives, remember, is based on population. So Minnesota right now has 8 representatives that go to Washington, D.C. to represent us. California, I believe, is up to 53. So clearly that was put in so that large states with large populations, had their needs met. Senate is the same for every state. Senators, there are 2, which for a small population state like North Dakota or South Dakota gives them, or kind of puts them at ease, because then they feel like there's some equality there. And again, that's our founding fathers thinking ahead and realizing that they have to meet the needs of large population states and small population states. The executive branch is Article 2. The people in our executive branch, their job is to carry out our laws or to execute our laws. And at this point, and I'm saying at this point because we will do individual units about the different branches later on after winter break, but at this point in time, I think what's really important to understand is that the executive branch is more than just the president and vice president. Clearly, those 2 men often get our focus and get our attention. But really, any kind of departments, like lately in the news, you've been hearing a lot about the EPA or the Department of Education or the Department of State, the Department of Labor. We're hearing about those because Trump is nominating who he wants to be the leader, the head of those different departments. The secretaries of those different departments is often how they're referred to. And so those people, all those hundreds of people that are in all those different departments, are part of the executive branch too. So the executive branch is a huge undertaking. Finally, the judicial branch was mentioned in Article 3 of the Constitution. There's 7 articles altogether. We're just going to worry about the first 3 at this point. The judicial branch has the smallest amount of information written about it. It sets up the Supreme Court and then says, and any other federal courts that are needed. Again, it shows that our founding fathers were thinking ahead and realizing that they can't just have a Supreme Court. They can't just have one court for the entire country. That court would get too bogged down and way too busy to cover everything. And so they then added this line about, and any other federal courts. And since then, dozens and dozens and dozens of federal courts have been added into our system. The judicial branch interprets the laws. Our Supreme Court really specifically interprets the Constitution and then sets up punishments for anybody who breaks those laws, much like we're used to courts being able to do. At this point, we will move into 3.02. As you can see here, 302 deals with summarizing checks and balances. When I see the word summarize, I think of 2 things. Can I define it in my own words? And then can I give examples? So for checks and balances, a definition. The balances part is all about equal distribution of power between the 3 branches. And again, those 3 branches being the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches, and keeping those 3 branches in balance with one another. Balance is certainly a key theme of the Constitution for sure. The checks piece of that is that each branch has limits on other branches, or each branch gets to check other branches to, again, make sure that one doesn't get too much power. I've seen a couple articles and read a couple of things that say another way you could think about it is checks for balance, that the checks that they have on one another helps keep them in balance, which I think is a nice way to think about it as well. So there's kind of your definition. Being able to put that into your own words is an important part of the learning. And now for the examples. Again, this presentation is in Empower already under the Seminar tab for this particular I Marvel Foundations of Government unit. And this chart does a great job of showing checks and balances. So for example, I already mentioned that the legislative branch makes the law, and this visual aid actually shows you that Congress makes the law. But look at this. The legislative branch can veto those laws. So that's an important check that the president has to make sure the legislative branch doesn't gain too much power or get out of control. The rest of this chart, the rest of this infographic, I'm going to let you study it on your own. And as you're filling out your study guide, you can think about pulling a couple examples off this chart, examples that make sense to you, that resonate with you, that stick with you. This is a great chart for that. And there are other infographics and other things that you can search to find your examples of checks and balances. This crash course video, this one's about 8 minutes long, is another piece that you can watch on your own. So for this particular learning target, my goal was to give you the definition of checks and balances and then give you some resources that you can look at to discover more about the examples of checks and balances. So again, you can watch this video on your own time or find other videos. And if you find some great videos, let me know. I can always put them in Empower for the other members of the 7-8 Adventures community. And then the last piece, 3.03, about the amendments, is that you'll be able to talk about the importance of the amendments and the protections that the amendments give us. So the first thing I want to share about the amendments is kind of illustrated by these two pictures that I put on. When the Constitution was written, it was written in a time of parchment and quills and dipping quills in ink and writing things by hand. And our framers of the Constitution knew enough, like I've mentioned before, that they wanted the Constitution to be a lasting document. Obviously, they couldn't anticipate that we'd be into a world of cell phones and instant information at our fingertips, but they knew things were going to change. And so they created a process in the Constitution so that it could be changed and updated and modified to meet the current climate and to meet current changes to society. So they created what's called an enduring document or a lasting document. Oh, I went one too far. Let me back up. So again, as I mentioned, they knew that as Americans, we would want to and even need to change our Constitution from time to time. We've done so 27 times. So it doesn't happen very often. They made the process difficult. There are a lot of steps that need to be done at the national level and even a lot of steps that need to be done at the state level. You have to get a lot of agreement. And you can tell, especially in our current political climate, it's hard to get Democrats and Republicans to agree about anything. So getting them to agree about changing the Constitution is huge. And so there's a lot of steps to try to get that to happen. They wanted the Constitution to be beyond those political parties, to be beyond, current events and just last minute types of changes of the Constitution. So again, that process was really difficult. I've already mentioned there are 27 of those changes. An amendment is just any written change to the Constitution. 10 of them were made right away with the Bill of Rights, and then the other 17 have been added as time has gone on. The most recent, I believe, 27 was in 2006. Fairly recent, about 10 years ago. And again, it's Article 4 that outlines that process. So again, just shows that the four founders of our country were thinking ahead and wanting this document to last past 1787. This is another spot where I am providing a resource for you for further study. One of the things, part of that learning and part of understanding the importance of the amendments is really, I think, focusing in on the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. So important. Again, I would say one of the most important parts of the Constitution are these first 10 amendments. And so I found an infographic, which I think does a great job of explaining the different freedoms that are provided in those first 10 amendments, and have a better link to the infographic. It's hard to read here, but I do have it linked here. And that would be another piece as you're filling out your study guide that you can use this resource and dig into the Bill of Rights a little more carefully in this kind of kid-friendly language version that I found. So again, everything that you've seen for 301, 302, 303 deals with this whole idea of anatomy of the Constitution. Just like we have lots of different parts that make our body work and function, the Constitution has lots of different parts that work and function. And you've heard about those. You've heard about all the different principles and ideals, like majority rules with minority rights, the 3 branches of government. You've heard about checks and balances. You've heard about the amendments, all of those working together to make things functional. We will be doing review sessions on block days this week. So those review sessions are a perfect place to bring any questions that you might have and be ready to connect with me about any content or any learning here that you need more explanation about.